Well, hello everyone to week one of a brand new Reddit League season. We are in season 5, a pretty milestone season, and we opened it up in Poland. My name is Zotomo, and I'm joined, as always, for the past 4 seasons by Calamity. How are you?
Hello, I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing pretty good, and we are joined by our friend. I think you've been on every single season we've done this show, MTheBassman. How are you doing today?
That is correct, I think. Yeah, I'm doing well. And as always, thank you for having me.
No problem. And both of you have now been promoted to Division One, so in the toughest division, and maybe looking at a chance at taking the title yourselves. So let's jump right into those Division One results in Poland. And yeah, given this is probably the easiest country on our list, MTheBassman, pretty good scores across the board. 3 perfect scores here, and no surprise, Box and Raidman have 2 of them.
Yeah, the seed itself was also pretty doable, I'd say. Most of the times there were clues that would help you pinpoint where you are, so it was also just a bit of a pinpointing thing. With one dodgy round where you didn't find much if we went the wrong way. But yeah, so yeah, a lot of high scores. Raidman and Boxa having a very good start. Of course, Raidman, it's his home country, so this is like a very pleasant start for him, I'd say. Yeah, not much to say really. Most people got good scores, and the ones who didn't got over 24.9k lost their game. And yeah, I'm obviously very happy about my score, but still got only 1 point out of it, even though I was 31 points away from perfect score. So that just shows the level of this division.
Yeah, I was about to say, welcome to Division One, where a draw is about the order of the day. Yeah, Calamity, a perfect game to start off for you. A wonderful start to Division One.
Yeah, I was very happy about that. I did get pretty lucky at the end there with round 5 because I was looking for the street name and just right at the end with 3 seconds to go, I found it. And if I hadn't luckily placed my pin close enough, because that was just like I didn't remember where exactly we had started at on that street, and I had no time to go back to the start. I tried to in like with 1 second to go, but time ran out. And if I hadn't gotten lucky there and placed in the right point, I would have lost like I don't know 2 points or 1 point, and would have been well not too happy. But like this, another thing was I don't know how I forgot, but while I was playing, I forgot that 25k gives a bonus point. So I probably was less nervous than I would have been otherwise. But yeah, fantastic start for me. I've only in like the 4 seasons previously, I've only had one perfect game ever. So starting off with one in Division 1 is fantastic for me. Still not enough for a win against Mr. Blue, of course, but I'll definitely take that. I'm very happy about that. And yeah, as Baseman said, you needed a lot of points to get any bonuses. Nimrif was the 5th highest scorer with 24,992. So if we were below that, then bye-bye to bonus points. And other than that, yeah, you kind of got what you would have expected coming into this week. Basement probably maybe one of the only ones where you could be like slightly surprised that you managed to pull off a good enough game to get a draw against Orpheus. But yeah, as you said, the seed wasn't the hardest, although I don't think it was the easiest seed out of all of them either. But yeah, I think Poland in general must have been easier than I expected it to be, because as Thomas said, I did think it was probably the easiest map of the season, but I didn't think it was that easy. But we still got a surprising amount of perfect games. Like we had 13 perfect games throughout all the divisions, and we have had seasons previously where that was like the amount of perfect games throughout all of the divisions in all of the weeks. Especially some of the earlier seasons where the level wasn't quite as high as it is now. So yeah, I don't know if Poland was just that easy, or if players just have gotten that much better in the off season. And maybe also we didn't really get to see too much of that last season of semi-difficult countries, because we had a lot of very easy countries last season.
Yeah.
So a perfect game wasn't really that out of the ordinary in stuff like Singapore, for example. But yeah, that was just something that stood out to me. Yeah, other than that, Boxer and Raidman, of course, with the perfect scores. Half of the division is French now. But for that, they actually didn't have too good of a start, as we'll see when we look at the table in a bit.
Yeah, so let's look at that table right now. So no surprise that the 3 perfect games are the ones on top. Calamity, your draw sees you down in 3rd. So Mr. Blue taking a bit off of you from there. But yeah, Raymond Boxa 1, 2. And a bunch of Frenchmen at the bottom, pretty much. Another interesting thing is the Mr. Blue and MTheBassman, 2 Dutch players right next to each other there as well. So yeah, MTheBassman, how do you, not a whole lot to talk about for this table because it's the first week, pretty much the one result deciding everything right now. But yeah, how do you fancy your chances in Division 1 this season?
Well, first of all, I'd like to point out the nice French sandwich tucked between the 2 Dutch players. That is aesthetically a bit of a pleasing sight to me. Anyway, what to expect from this division? Well, first of all, I kind of feel like at the end of the last season, I kind of lucked my way a little bit into promotion with some results going the perfect way for me. But I do really like being in this division because I'm less expected to be in good places in the table. I have less pressure, so I go into the games a bit more relaxed and just see whatever. My goal really is to not embarrass myself too much, and let's see if I can stay up. I think I definitely have a shot at it, but I would not need to make mistakes because one mistake is usually a loss in this division. So let's just see how it goes. Considering that I drew Orpheus, who in my opinion is one of the better players, I definitely think that I can give everyone in this division a run for the money. If it's not a win, then at least that.
Very nice. Yeah, Calamity, any comments on the table and maybe your chances as well in this division?
Yeah, that's the one good thing about Geoguessr in this competition, that you don't always necessarily need to be better than your opponents. If you can just stay close enough to them and get above 24.9k, you'll still end up with 1 point at least. So that's also my goal for the season. I go into every game with the intention of getting above 24.9k. And if I can achieve that, I'm happy. I won't be able to achieve that in all of the maps that we've got this season. I have big doubts about, Russia, or I don't know, maybe some of the world maps too, if we get some unlucky seeds. Maybe Canada, if we end up in the middle of nowhere in, I don't know, Alberta somewhere. But yeah, my goal for the season in and of itself, I think I'll be happy if I finish around 6th. So just sort of in the middle of the table. I'd be very happy if I managed to somehow get into the playoffs. I have no illusions about, managing to win it or anything. I mean, if it comes to it, if I somehow end up in a position where I can, then I'm going to give it my all, of course. But I'm not expecting a top 4 finish. But so far, the start's been pretty good. So I'll just see how it goes and I'll take it week by week. But yeah, as long as I don't end up getting relegated, I won't be too disappointed. And so far, in my first season in a new division has always been pretty disappointing to end with. So I'll just, if I've managed to end relatively well, then that'll also be something nice. And yeah, I noted down as well. It looks very nice. There's a lot of blue, white, and red from 4th downwards. It's just Boxer standing out a bit with this black and yellow there, or gold. So yeah.
Very nice. Well, let's take a look at the fixtures coming up in week 2 for Division 1, and we are headed to Jordan for our 2nd week. Calamity, you take on Pluki, but MTheBassman, it doesn't get any better for you in week 2. You're taking on Boxa, the reigning champion.
Yeah. Well, I'm happy to have the hard opponents first, to be honest, because then later on I can focus on matches against opponents where I might fancy my chances more. To have a box out of the way early is a nice one for me, but yeah, it's going to be tough. Definitely, I've put in a lot of practice in Jordan just so I can hopefully get a decent seed and just get over 24.9k. But yeah, and otherwise with the matches, Calamity might be in a very good position against an opponent that's, I'd say, around his skill level. So he could have a good position on the table after that. Otherwise, yeah, Orpheus Nimrith could be interesting because they both might be contenders for the playoffs too.
Mm.
And yeah, Bulgur is also probably gonna have a rough time against Raidman after losing the first week already against, I forgot, was it Boxa or no, it was Nimrith, sorry.
Yeah. Against that newcomer. Yeah, Calamity.
Yeah, I've got a rematch with Bluky. We've played against each other last season as well in Division 2, where we were close to a perfect draw. He got a 25k and I got 24,997 in Lakes of the World, with the two best scores of the division back then. So it could definitely be an interesting match. Looking forward to that. I do think that, well, Jordan in general, I'll talk more about it later, but I think it's a map where you probably, a little bit of practice will already make you quite decent at it, but if you don't practice at all, you could be in for a really rough time because there's just not a lot of street view coverage, but there's also not a lot of great signs available. For the other games, I think, as Bassman said, Orpheus Nimrith is a very interesting one. Of course, they're probably going to be fighting for some of the remaining playoff spots behind Boxer and Raidman, although, you never know if they manage to keep their form throughout the whole season. And yeah, they might both make it, but it could definitely be a very important match to decide between the two of them. And yeah, as Bassman said as well, Bulgur is in for a rough time against Raidman. Probably not expected to get a win for sure, but maybe he can get to enough for a bonus point at least. And yeah, I think Verdok against Mr. Blue could be pretty interesting too. I mean, Verdok didn't start too well in Poland, but he can definitely put up a decent fight as well. And I think if he wants to, not get relegated to Division 2 again, then he probably has to pick up like at least a point against the likes of Mr. Blue, who are also sort of on that, on that edge of being around that 4th, 5th place where you could maybe make it to the playoffs. Maybe you don't if you don't, get your best game going on most of the weeks. So I think that's a pretty important game for both of them, of course, as well, because in the position of Mr. Blue, if you want to get to the playoffs, then you can't lose too many points to, the likes of Verdok. Yeah, but for Bassman, 24.9k or more is going to give you points. Any less, pretty unlikely.
You just got to hope
that's the same thought I have.
Yeah, that's pretty much how it is in Division 1. Well, transitioning over to Division 2 and their results in Poland, we had 3 perfect games here as well, and kind of a surprise that all 3 of them came from new participants in Division 2. Bassman.
Yeah, very interesting to have seen. Is this maybe the first perfect draw between 2 players, or was there not? I don't remember exactly, but yeah, very good scores from both Barry and Renata. Le Thompson had a perfect scores. Yeah, very high scores all around the board. So a bit of a false start for Ice Thyro, I'd say there. Although Clyde in itself is also a great player, and Moise kind of got away with a win there because he could have lost against a lot of the opponents, but he just happened to face a player that Diva was standing. But yeah, I was not a big fan of the Division 2 seed. I did really badly there because that kind of suburban-esque areas, I'm not really very good at that. But thankfully, I'm not in Division 2 anymore. Yeah, otherwise, very interesting results. Expected maybe a bit more from the likes of LCN and Boca did well in Division 3, but maybe not quite used to the level of Division 2 yet. That could be it. Yeah, otherwise not really much else to say.
Yeah, Clemmy, some of the more veterans in Division 2 not having the best start to the season.
Yeah, that's true, but I think overall, actually, I'd say the veterans still did pretty well if you consider it. Like Clyde won, Guelo won, Shumi and Max at least drew. So it's really just um that's actually all of them already. If you just consider who's been in Division 2 last season. Of course, you could maybe consider Ice the veteran of the league, but of course he came down from Division 1 last season. So yeah, not a great start for him. Overall, yeah, I had a nightmare as well in the Division 2 seed. When I was creating the seeds, I had a total blackouts in the last round there. I also found some wrong area code, I think, or whatever. But I have to say for that as well that, in previous seasons, these other division seeds were always the last seeds I played before I played my seed, as sort of the last just run through before we get going. And this season, because I have to create all these seeds, they're basically the first seeds I play before all the practice, because I never know. Like if I have to create 100 seeds just to get like 5 possible ones for the league, then I don't want to do that after already having practiced a lot and being sick of the country. So they're the first things I play, and otherwise I probably would have done better in that seed. But yeah, some great performances there, especially from some of the newcomers. Zotomo and Renata with perfect games. Snorlax as well. I think he was the quickest by far out of everyone. Just, a bit too quick for his own good and made a mistake when pinpointing. And yeah, Max and Shumi, by the way, Bassman is the one perfect draw I remember. There must have been one more, I think, in the past, but they drew last season 25k each in like week 6 or week 7 or something like that. That was like the start of both of their comebacks into a better position in the table. But yeah, I think Ordboka in general, and maybe LCN as well, but Ordboka was just on the cusp and just about got promoted last season from Division 3. He finished 4th in the table and then won the playoff game. So he might be in for a pretty rough season there.
Nice. Well, taking a look at that table again, it is our 3 perfect scorers at the top of the table. Interesting enough, though, they all have draws. So while they're at the top, they have yet to get their first win, followed by the other 3 who did get wins in this one. But yeah, again, not a whole lot to shape up, but kind of a Nordic and American league going on here, MTheBassman.
Yeah, it's with the abundance of French flags nowadays in the Reddit League, it's nice to see a bit of variation. Even some from the Faroe Islands. Snorlax is from the Faroes apparently. And but yeah, about the table, yeah, of course, after 1 week, can't say a lot of things. But what is interesting to see in this table is that you already see point gap between like the bottom 3 and the ones above that with 2 points. So apparently the people who did get a draw or bonus point, I don't know, the 1-0 situations where someone only got 1 point, so that might not be the best for the bottom 3 there, so they kind of got the work cut out for them. Yeah, it's really unpredictable to see how it goes, because I think a lot of players in this division are promotion contenders. Barry, Renata has been doing well as of late. Guelo, Clyde, as always. Moist, yeah, I don't know. But I would say that the ones that are on top right now might stick around there.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah, Calamity, do you think the Ice will have a chance to get back up into Division 1, or are some of these new players in Division 2 that have a strong start going to give him a good run for his money?
I don't think he'll be able to get back into Division 1, not this season at least. I'm assuming he's a bit more motivated than last season, because otherwise, well, why would he have signed up for another season? But I don't know if he's quite at the level that he was back when he got promoted in Season 3. I do think he can probably do better and get out of those relegation spots, but promotion might be a bit too high to aim for. Because, yeah, there's a lot of very strong players in here. And I'd say pretty much anyone out of the top 9 currently has a good chance to fight for promotion and maybe get promoted. And yeah, we already saw kind of like the new tiebreaker system coming into play a bit. It would have gone the same way with the old tiebreaker system, but Max and Guelo both scored 24.955 and ended up in 6th and 7th place in the week. And it was a happy end for both, though, with Guelo winning his game anyway, so not needing the bonus point, and Max coming out ahead on the tiebreaker because he was faster. But yeah, as I said, he was also closer, so he would have gotten the tiebreaker from last season's system as well. But yeah, another thing is that we should probably adapt the graphic there a bit, because it is now the total score that is the first tiebreaker essentially. So you can't very well see why, for example, some people are above others in this table based on just how it looks right now. So we should probably get that on there.
Okay, we'll definitely work on that for week 2. But speaking of week 2, the fixtures for Division 2 look like this. And despite how many Americans we have in the basement, none of them play each other. A rare occurrence for sure.
Yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, about the matches, I think there's a lot of interesting ones here. Obviously, Snorlax, the Tomps, who are both have been looking very good in preseason, could already be a pretty decisive match for how the rest of the seasons will go. I think for Barry, this will be a good chance to extend his, or well, not extend his lead, but get some good points at the start in against Boca. And Renata Clyde is another one that I'm quite interested to see how that's going to go. But yeah, in a country like Jordan, also, of course, depends on how much practice you put into it, as the people who have practiced Jordan will also tell you. So yeah, that's also going to be an important factor. How much practice are they willing to put in to get a good score?
Yeah, Clement, any matches that stand out to you here in the coming week?
I think most of them are pretty interesting. Definitely, as Baseman mentioned, Snorlax, Zotomo, and Clyde against Renata as well, who all did pretty well in week 1. But I also quite interested in Guelo against Shumi, which could be a pretty interesting matchup as well, looking at who might have a chance of promotion or not. And yeah, there's not a lot of easy opponents in Division 2, so the rough times continue for Boca, Ice, and LCN. Although out of their 3 opponents this week, Moist Flubber was probably the one who had the worst game, in quotation marks. He got like 23 point something K, so maybe one slight mistake in there, but he was the one who had the worst game last week, or this week. So maybe Ice with the best chance there to get something going. Although, Boca, LCN, and Ice also didn't have bad games necessarily in week 1. So you never know if it was just, one maybe slightly unlucky round that brought them down there. So we'll be able to tell a lot more next week about how their chances are looking going forward.
Nice. Well, moving on to Division 3. Only one perfect game in this one, but our new boy, Armand, getting that. So the kind of streak continues from Division 2. And yeah, in the basement, probably have our first real kind of ouch moment with Seppo's score against Freckles here.
Ooh, yeah. That's a bit of a weird one, because I don't really remember the Division 3 seed, and I don't know if the lack of better scores is because it's a division in a lower level, or just because the seed was more difficult. But yeah, not the start you want to hope for Seppo, who I do think will also be in trouble this season, considering the players that are also in here. Bastek kind of got away lucky there with Faraba not being able to play and getting, well, not free win necessarily, but yeah, some 3 points he's probably going to be happy with. Bootbad putting in a good score. I haven't really heard of him or her before, but I don't know. With that score, I could see some good stuff from them. Otherwise, yeah, Armand also very impressive. against Steal the Snake.
Yeah, Calamity Firebond unfortunately withdrew right before the competition started, so we were unable to find a replacement for him. So he'll just be red carded throughout the entirety of the season. So already one player has dropped. So Pashtek enjoying his win in Poland. Probably would have liked it to come a different week, but yeah, as Bassman said, his score wasn't the best.
Yeah, right after the competition started, actually, because if he had done it like a day or two before, I might have still been able to maybe switch around, and no one would have complained about, maybe ending up in a higher division. But it was like, I think 1 or 2 days into week 1 already, so
okay.
Nothing really I could do at that point. And yeah, Pastek will take those 3 points, and a pretty good start for the Frenchman here. All 3 of them winning their games. And yeah, Mo's 25k is very impressive, considering it wasn't too difficult, the seed, in the sense that it was very difficult, like finding the general area or something. But it was a pretty rural seed in the sense that, like, we had one like obvious highway location, but apart from that, we weren't really in any bigger cities at all. So Amol was, even out of all of the other players that played that seed, was the only one who even got close to a 25k, in the sense that he was like, no one else even got 4 aces. And like, I finished 3rd and Boxer finished 4th in the seed, and both of us only managed to get 2 aces. Not losing a lot of points otherwise. It was still like 24.9 something. But very, very difficult to pinpoint a lot of these rounds in the given time limit. A very impressive score from him for sure. And yeah, Seppo had a bit of a mare with 11,000 points. It's by far the lowest, even out of all 5 divisions. I think the second lowest score in the whole league was 15k or something. If we ignore, Reddit League Next, where, the newcomers only have 3 minutes. So that's not surprising that some of them are finishing relatively low. And that also was by far the most difficult seed out of all of them, coincidentally. But yeah, decent start then for Freckles. Not the highest score there, definitely. Even if I'm looking at this, the second lowest score. But yeah, he's gonna take that as well. And yeah, as Bassman also said, pretty impressive from Bootbat with his 24.9k. And yeah, Blockchain coming back to Red League at least gets 1 bonus point for finishing in 6th. Yeah, Division 3 is also going to be a bit easier to come across bonus points, of course, with Faraban being red carded, because now there's only 5 people you need to beat instead of 6. And yeah, Hugo and WTF with a very close draw there, interestingly. A relatively low scoring draw, which we get pretty rarely.
Well, taking a look at that table, our 2 new Frenchmen are on top with their very nice wins, including that perfect game. Closed will be very happy with the start of his season as he splits those Frenchmen in the top 4. And yeah, Hugo, a pretty good start given how his season kind of went last time around in MTheBassman.
Yeah, I still remember when I was in Division 3. Wow, that already feels like ages ago, by the way. But where he had like a pretty good season, even ended in the playoffs, only to lose it to Calamity. And I feel like things didn't really go his way the last 2 seasons, so this time he can finally pick up the pace a bit again. And yeah, I think the 2 Frenchmen up there might remain around those spots, because if I had to judge from the first game and their preseason, they could be good contenders for promotion. But yeah, otherwise, not really a lot to say about this. Otherwise, I could still, even with Steal the Snake and Paulinho not having any points, they might still be in the running too. But rough starts can happen. So
yeah, Calamity Steal the Snake had a pretty good run of form the last couple of seasons in Division 4. But yeah, not the best start to his new division here in 3. And yeah, probably Seppo, always kind of that relegation avoider. So we'll see if he can continue that trend this season, perhaps.
Perhaps, but that's a really rough start. And yeah, the opponents aren't getting any weaker. And looking at these players, there's no like clear relegation candidate other than him. So like you'd have to have some of the maybe more favored players have a really bad season as well for him to even have a chance. And then he needs to, do better than this because, the others can play as badly as they want. If you get 11K on a map like Poland, then you're probably not looking very likely to at least make it to the relegation playoffs. But on this table, you can see even more how impressive Armand's perfect game was because like Freckles has 2 aces and no one else is even above 1. So yeah, very, very good that game. And it's also the first table that's actually well sorted by the win-draw-loss ratio because, well, we only had 1 draw and both of them got a bonus point. So yeah.
Very nice. Well, the fixtures for them in the coming week, Armand, after his perfect game in Poland, will get a nice little bye week. So he was scheduled to take on Forabond. And Seppo and still does Nick currently at the bottom of the table of a matchup here in the basement.
Yeah, that should be an interesting one, considering one of those players will have to be on the board, which might set a precedent for this season. So if Seppo were to also lose this, I definitely consider him the biggest relegation candidate. Otherwise, I think Bootbat Close should be really interesting as they both got off to a good start and would of course want to continue that. Yeah, Armand getting a bit lucky in a map like Jordan, getting free win there, so that will be a great start for him of the season and his Reddit League career at that. Yeah, otherwise, Pastek Paulino could also be interesting.
Nice. Yeah, Clement, anything from you here on these upcoming fixtures?
Yeah, it's a bit of an interesting one to have, like Jordan as your bye week, because the thing is, in a bye week, what you really want is either one of 2 things. Like you either want to have it in a map where you think you're really bad at, so you don't have to play it, or you want to have it in a map where your chance of getting a 25k is as high as possible, because that's really the only change you can make in a bye week. You can get a 25k and get an additional bonus point. Otherwise, it doesn't matter if you score 24.9 or 2 points. Now with total score being the first tiebreaker, it actually matters slightly. But yeah, in general, Jordan probably not the map where you want to have the tiebreaker in regards to getting a bonus point. But yeah, definitely it allows you to skip one of the countries that you do have to practice quite a bit if you want to see a decent result from it. And yeah, Seppo, as Baseman said, I think he needs a win against Steal the Snick. Otherwise, his chances are looking pretty bleak. Steal the Snick also definitely one of the candidates that is gonna be having a rough time trying to fight against relegation. And yeah, for him as well, he also needs a win here. Otherwise, it would be a pretty bad start to the season for him. Interesting matchups for sure are Bootbot against Closed. Freckles against Hugo as well. Maybe Hugo can finally have a good season again after 2 relatively disappointing ones. Even though I think he said already that he doesn't have the time to practice much. But maybe that also just takes a little bit of pressure off of him. And I think most of the countries this season aren't countries that that you benefit from practicing sort of a medium amount from. Like, I think there are either countries that you have to practice a lot for, or countries that, practicing a little bit is gonna do you just fine. So yeah, it might not be too bad for him to not have that much time to practice. If he can still, like maybe at least play the other division seeds just to get a bit of a feel for the country, I think he could have a decent chance to perform, at least sort of mid-table. And yeah, WTF against Blockchain is another game that might be pretty important for both of them in regards to they're both candidates where I think like purely based on skill level, they're somewhere in the midfield of the division, maybe around like 6th, 7th, 8th. But if they're having a particularly good or a particularly bad season, it could go either way for them. So a matchup against an opponent that is in that same category is going to be pretty important for them.
Nice. Well, moving on to our split divisions in Division 4 and 5. Division 4A and their results in what was a pretty much urban Poland seed for Division 4 saw us get quite a few high scores. But as you can see, lots of 24-9s, but pinpointing still a little bit tricky for some of these players. MTheBassman.
Yeah, I remember it being a relatively easy seed. I think I 25k'd it with not too big of a problem. So I'm not surprised some of these players also put in a really good score. Yeah, in a seed like that, you kind of just need to put up a good score, otherwise you're gonna just lose. So like Wakelak with a decent score on his own still lost out to Soviet Spy, who in itself would have lost to a lot of these players. Yeah, Pastetli Hexal. I'm quite I don't know, not necessarily surprised Pastetli put up such a good score, but against a player like Hexal, who I rate a bit, or how do you say, well, I rate decently. I'd say that's a good performance. And MTheBeats, bit of a false start for him, I'd say.
Yeah, Clement, any comments on these results? Yeah, I had a couple new matchups. Flipster and MTheBeat, both new players, and Dromi also a new player in addition to this division.
Yeah, I think impressive was the word you were looking for Pastetli's performance. I'd definitely say that's true. A very good score from him there. And I do agree that the Division 4 seed, at least it was by far the most urban. The other seeds didn't have too many. I think like the most was like you'd have 2 locations in like bigger cities, and then the rest would be like smaller towns or some rural locations here and there. Division 4 actually had like 4 big cities in it, and then one location that was in like a small town, but about like 500 meters away from a highway. So definitely the easiest seed in regards to at least getting a high score. But, you know, not the kind of seed I personally would like, as people should well know by this stage. And yeah, you see that there, of course, as well, with a lot of very, very high scores, but no perfect scores there. So even with the seed being very easy, people still made a mistake here or there. And yeah, it can quite easily happen in a city. Although, you know, with 4.5 minutes in Division 4, usually you're going to have a pretty decent amount of time to at least narrow down the right area of the city, and then from there it's not that difficult anymore to just find the right streets, because Polish cities are usually quite well signed in that regard, that you'll at least find a street sign on pretty much every corner. And yeah, Flips are getting off to a very good start in the duel of the newcomers against MTheBeat. Yeah, the newcomers, MTheBeat himself and Dromi, not too well with the 2 lowest scores. Dromi himself, you know, 24.5 is still a decent score generally. But yeah, MTheBeat, I don't actually remember what his game was like. Maybe let me just quickly look that up on whether it was just one mistake or if he's just been a bit okay, it was mainly one mistake. He made like one slight pinpointing, or like didn't quite find the right place in another round too, but then 3 aces, and just the last round, which was the one wait, was that? No, it wasn't even that round, I think. I'm confused. Oh no, I was looking at his pin on the map and I was thinking, I don't remember this. Obviously he made a mistake. So yeah, it was the last round. It was the round that was a bit more rural. So maybe you just went the wrong way there. And if you go the wrong way, then, well, there's not really a lot you can find, which is quite unfortunate. But I feel like generally, strategically, everyone should at least check out both sides for a bit. Like you can go only like 30, 40 seconds in one direction, but if you only go in one direction and don't check out the other side at all, then you're prone to things like that where you just end up going into the middle of nowhere for 4.5 minutes and you just end up not finding anything. But yeah, so looking at his score and his round by round performance, at least it's still looking like he's a pretty good player, but just maybe got a bit unlucky this week.
See, well, taking a look at their table, and after the first week, it's kind of nice. A little bit of self-sorting at the top and the bottom there. The two Germans sitting at the top, and two Frenchmen, two newcomer Frenchmen sitting at the bottom. For those, yeah, two Americans and Lunacy and Solar Sensei also next to each other in the table as well. Yeah. So, any favorites here from you, MTheBassman, for this season?
Yeah, I was just thinking about that. I'm not surely because one, I don't know all of the players in here, like Dromy and McPete, no idea what their skill level is around. But I don't know. I would think that maybe even if Lunacy is in sixth now, he might be in for a shout. Hexalt, I think, is a decent chance. Yeah, I'm not sure what the skill of Sepkirst and Flipster are, but I mean it could be a very close race for that. Although I don't think that Wayclock will contend for promotion, but we'll probably have to look at the bottom a bit more. But who knows? Maybe might have a really good season this time. Yeah, tough to say, really.
Yeah, Calamity.
Yeah, I'd agree generally with Lunacy, Hexal. I also think Flipster and Sepkirst are pretty good candidates for a fight at the top there. And well, that's already 4 people, so already one of them will have to miss out. And yeah, we're always happy to see surprises and people doing better than we expected. Not so happy seeing people doing worse than we expected, but what can you do? You can already see there in the table how close some of these results were with Hexal and Pastetli, with a perfect draw in the sense that, separated by 0 points, and Lunacy and Solar Sensei only separated by 1 point in their game. And yeah, the 2 newcomers in Drome and McPete there at the bottom, but yeah, as I said, not too much you can say off of that just yet. And yeah, I think it could be a very interesting season in Division 4A here for sure.
Well, taking a look at their fixtures in the coming week in Jordan, probably a couple interesting things. No derbies quite yet. A couple good pairs of countries in this division. Pastetli and Flipster, though, sort of the German-speaking derby. Not the same country, though. Yeah, anything you really have an interest in here, MTheBassman?
I'd say bar maybe Wayclock, Hexalt. All of these games seem pretty close to me. Like Calamity said, there's not really a lot you can say yet about McPete and Dromy based on one match day. So they all could be very interesting fixtures. But Pastetli is going up against probably one of the better players in the division. So if he can also get a result out of this, that could be really good for the rest of the season, because I'm not really yet sure what to think of it if he is gonna struggle to stay up or contend for promotion. That don't know his skill level well enough for that. But yeah, I think this week could be pretty decisive how the rest of the season's going to go for these players.
Yeah, Calamity, some of our kind of returning Division 4 players, Soviet, Lunacy, Hexalt, Wayclock, with that new blood in the division, are they going to have a bit of a harder time in this week? They all kind of face each other this time, so they kind of get to avoid that a bit.
Yeah, there's definitely some interesting points in these fixtures. As Bassman already pointed out, Pastetli will be a pretty important week for him just to see how the rest of his season will go, and whether Poland was just like a bit of a one-off thing where, he was favored by the very easy seed, or if he's generally at a much higher level this season where he can actually maybe contend for promotion. Soviet is another interesting one where I think this week will start to show us what we can expect from him. He's currently third in the table, but as I already mentioned in the previous show, he's been a bit inconsistent with different countries, and even being third in the table, his game in Poland was sort of average. And well, still enough for a win, but against, last season's playoff semi-finalist in Lunacy this week, I think it'll give us a bit of a better pointer. And yeah, Mick Peets doesn't get much easier, facing off against the other German laughing from the top in week 2 now. And yeah, Baseman mentioned that a bit earlier, but there's always that discussion you can have about whether you want the most difficult opponents at the beginning or the end of a season. And I talked about that with him recently as well. And as he said before, he prefers to, getting it over with. And I'd rather start off well in the season. Both can sort of create a different type of pressure, because if you start against the supposedly easier opponents, then you can put yourself in a pretty good position in the table with some wins, but that can also mean, or it can mess with your expectations and leave you a bit disappointed when you then go on a losing streak against the stronger opponents later on. Or, well, not to mention in the scenario where you lose the easy matches at the start and end up in a situation where you desperately need points in the last 2 weeks against the likes of Raidman or Boxer. That could also just, add a whole different kind of pressure. And on the other hand, if you start against a strong opponents, that, any points you'll get will be a bonus, and you'll have a bit less pressure for those games. But at the same time, it'll add on pressure for any subsequent matches later, where you then need the points, except for, if you started off with wins against Box and Raidman, then I guess but, it can create pressure at different points for different games. And at the end, I think it's just a bit of a personal thing about what you like.
Okay, well, taking a look at the other half of Division 4, Division 4B, and their results. Finally get to see my name on here, even though I'm not too proud of that score. But 2 perfect games in this one, and MTheBassman out of Diesel and Carp.
Yeah, Wallace start for Carp. Very impressive score, but just not enough, because Lab and Grab is also a good player on his own right. Yeah, not sure what happened there, Zotomo, but also not really great start for you. Jake, who I would think is one of the contenders for promotion, not having the best game here. Maybe Poland isn't necessarily his thing. I still need to see his video on it. Otherwise, yeah, Nakiro, not with a good performance, but still got the win against Pork Steaks, who might be in for a rough season here. Otherwise, not too much to say, I think.
Yeah, Calamity, the German derby there at the bottom, not too bad. Herjemini coming out on top, but still a very good score from Treblina, a new player.
Yeah, it was the closest win of the week as well in our German derby here, with Herjemini coming out on top by 139 points. But yeah, not a terrible start for Tribly here. However, she only just about doesn't get into the bonus points, which is a bit annoying there. I think coming 6th. But yeah, it's promising signs to that she'll at least be able to fight for, a place in the middle of the table somewhere. And yeah, after coming 2nd last season, Diesel is surely the favorite to win the division this season. And yeah, perfect game in the first week. Like, is there a better way to start it? Yeah, so Tomo, I think you're gonna be in for a pretty rough season.
Yeah.
Yeah, see what you can do. And
yeah, I messed up round 1. I just got kind of pigeonholed way too early on a misinformation, and then I wasted my whole time trying to find a street rather, that didn't exist, because I was in the wrong city. And so then I was pretty much, whatever. I did pretty good in the other 4. I think I got 3 aces, 2 aces, and then like a 4-9-9 something. But yeah, after that first round, I knew I was up against Diesel, and I was like, well, he's gonna get a perfect game in this one. So we'll just kind of let week 1 kind of be done with and move on. So
yeah,
I know the feeling.
Yeah.
Carp also couldn't have really wished for a better first game, as he 25Ks against his former Formula G teammate in Laban Greb. But yeah, Laban, on the other hand, 5th place, so he does pick up 1 bonus point there for that. And Hedegme also even getting a bit unlucky against Jake because he was only 26 meters away on the one round where he lost his 1 point. So
Oof.
just 1 meter closer, and he would have started out with a perfect game there. So that's a bit unfortunate. Jake himself called well, he called it a boneheaded mistake, which I would support that assessment. Where he essentially, I think he got overwhelmed by sort of like information of a road number, and then he found that road number, and it's quite clear it was around in Lublin, and you're in not in the center, but in sort of a still very well populated suburb, and he just got tunnel visioned on that road number, and he put it himself somewhere like, I don't know, 10 kilometers outside of the city in like, I don't know, place where two people live, and lost his game there. Still wouldn't have beaten Hedegme. He like made one small pinpointing error because he ran out of time in one of the other rounds too. But at least would have been enough for 2 points for sure. If he could have pinpointed the round in Lublin. If he just would have placed it somewhere in the city, it would have potentially at least been enough for 1 point there. And yeah, so interesting first week for this division. I think on average the score is a bit lower. Well, maybe not on average, but we have a few more people who finished down the lower end of the scores in Division 4 compared to Division 4A. But nonetheless, very, very good scores here as well.
Well, then after just 1 week, it is again our 25K sitting at the top, Diesel and Carp. Hidekmi and newcomer Yemeni, promoted from Division 5, has a pretty good start up there in fourth. Jake Lyons and myself, probably not the start we would have wanted, seeing ourselves in the relegation zone. Anybody you favor in this one? We already talked about Diesel, but anybody else who might be joining him going up in the basement?
Ooh, well, I think a lot of these players are pretty close to each other in terms of skill level. I honestly could see anyone from first to eighth, current first eight that is, fight for promotion. Not sure what to think of Hedekme yet. He had a great start for sure, but I do have to see if he's going to be consistent enough throughout the season. I would agree Diesel is a good shout for promotion. Carp might be, not sure yet how he's going to do in a division of this level. Nakiro should never be counted out, even if he had a bit of a bad score. 11 grab is a decent enough player. Yeah, I don't know. It's really up for grabs for me in this division.
Yeah, similar thoughts from you, Calamity, on this?
Yeah, absolutely. It's very hard to call. If we're just talking about potentially the players with the highest skill, I'd maybe say Diesel, Carp, and Jake, but anything can happen in Reddit League over the course of 9 weeks, and it's not the longest season with just 9 games. So a mistake like Jake made in week 1 can already be pretty costly because you're starting off on the back foot. You're already 3 points behind that you need to make up, and that's never a good position to be in. I think there's quite a lot of players. Again, in the way that I mentioned it with WTF and blockchain in Division 3, who I'd put sort of around the middle of the pack with probably Hedekme, Hayemine, Nakio, Laban. Triply, I don't know too much about yet, so I can't really say too much about her. Where all of them, if they get off to a good start, if they have some great performances and maybe get a bit lucky sometimes, they can end up in that maybe third playoff spot instead of Jake if he doesn't get, if he can't avoid those kinds of mistakes in the coming weeks.
Nice. Well, moving on to their next matchups. In Jordan, and it doesn't get any easier for me in the basement. I face off against Carp, who had a perfect game in week 1. Nakira also going up against Diesel will not be a matchup too easy for him.
Yeah, to be fair, Jordan is a country where you can, if you put the practice in, you can like throw your opponent off if they themselves didn't play too well. I don't know how much practice Carp puts in it, so I don't know. But on a map like this, there's always a chance, I'd say. But yeah, as you pointed out, Diesel Nakiro is an interesting one. I think heading me, if he wins this too, that could really be a confidence boost for him for the rest of the season. Yeah, with Herr Yemin Laban and Trablia, sorry if I mispronounced that, against Jake Lyons. Those are also pretty decisive matches to see what direction they are going to be looking at in the table. I'd say so. Yeah, pretty interesting games overall.
Oh yeah, Calamity. Anyone you're looking forward to in particular?
Yeah, Heading started off very strong in Poland after they had a pretty disappointing last season. And so I think the match against Pork Steaks now is like the best he could have hoped for, because it's probably Pork Steaks especially has been someone who's, I think, not practiced too much, because he's always kind of performed very well on the easy countries or the world maps, but struggled on some of the more difficult countries. So I think if Hedigme can get a good score here too, and he could start off with 2 victories back to back, which would already put him close to his points total of last season. So that would be a very, very good start for him, and maybe also give him the confidence that he needs to fight for the promotion. Trebliha against Jake, of course, very important. Both of them no points on the table after week 1, and they're gonna need to start getting them soon if they want to have a chance of promotion. Well, what's a better time than now? Yeah, Hayemine against Lawan Greb, a duel between 2 players who come in fresh from Division 5 last season. So they were on different sides of that division, but both of them not winning their Division 5. Oh, wait, no, Laban did win, never mind. But Laban didn't really win in a very dominant fashion. That was very close in Division 5B last season. So we'll see how they'll do. Generally, I don't think that they'd be the first ones I'd look at for promotion. But yeah, as we said before while talking about the table, they could still be in for a chance if they get a really good season out of themselves. Yeah, Diesel against Nakuro will also be a pretty interesting matchup, because yeah, Nakuro didn't have the strongest first week in terms of his score, but he still, picked up 3 points for a win. And picking up points in your bad weeks is important as well if you want to fight for promotion. Diesel will be a much more difficult opponent. Nakuro will definitely have to step up his game if he wants to get any points from this match. But if he does get a good points haul out of it, then he's definitely a candidate as well who could fight for that promotion spot.
Very nice. Well, moving into our final division, Division 5, and this is where we see the largest number of newcomers, as most of our preseason qualifiers are placed into Division 5. Just only, I think, what is it, 4 people?
I think it's 4.
Are remain from the previous season. So a good chunk of them are all new, 6 in this case. And here we've got a couple returning people, like in Bombadil. Soundbite is not new in the sense that he was in season 3, but didn't qualify for season 4. So nice to see him back, although he didn't have the strongest start. But we do still have a perfect game, 2 of them, in fact, this low down by 2 Americans, Xander and Artificial, MTheBassman.
Yeah, of course, very impressive from both of them. So yeah, like you said, with a lot of these newcomers, I'm afraid I won't have the most wise things to say about this, but I think Xander Ollie was already a pretty important game, considering that their performances last season, they could both be contenders for promotion. But with so many new people, I don't know if there are other players that might be in for a shout for that. I mean, considering Artificial had a perfect game, I would say maybe them. I don't know. Also, pretty surprised that Penguin, despite being Polish, didn't put up the best score, but still got a win against Bombadil. Didn't even we got an even worse score, but yeah, don't have much to say about this otherwise.
Yeah, that's kind of the fun part about Division 5 is we get to learn about a lot of new players and see what they can do against some names we do know, and see if they might have a chance to get promotion. Yeah, anything from you here, Calamity? Your teammate from Formula G, Clemens, is in this, and he just didn't quite have enough for a win this week.
Yeah, Clemens, as well as Soundbite, both coming back from relegation from Division 5, as well as Bombadil narrowly escaping relegation last season, not managing any points in the first week this season, which will already put them on the back foot a bit. Clemens there coming the closest out of them, just about like 375 points behind Jamabi. But well, no points are no points, not in the top 50%. So not the greatest start for him. Penguin and Zeppelin also not overly impressive considering they were playing in their home country, but they do both come away with 3 points nonetheless. Yeah, perfect games from Artificial and Xander, who I'm going to have to say are like clear favorites for me to be fighting for that promotion spot. I also think like if we're talking about like the third place, we could see Ollie being in there for a shout. Maybe Zeppelin. He's done very well in Poland. At least, compared to Penguin. But yeah, you never know how favored he was by it being his home map. Maybe that was a very big advantage for him, and he's gonna be pretty bad in all of the other weeks, or it was not that big of an advantage at all, and he's gonna be in for a shout as well. But I think those are like the main candidates. For everyone else, it would take a bit of a surprise and maybe some very strong performances that you wouldn't necessarily expect to get into that third spot, maybe. But I do think like unless we see any big surprises, I think Artificial and Xander are almost like a lock-in for first and second.
Very nice. We'll take a look at their table. Yeah, not a whole lot to speak of quite yet, but yeah, definitely not the start for some players like Ollie and Soundbite, who are trying to stay up and avoid having to be completely out of Reddit League and get back in it. But other than that, a pretty nice starts, though. Very good starts for Artificial and Xander in their opening weeks, taking wins. No draws in this one. MTheBassman. But yes, a couple names at the bottom are all veterans. Vincenzo, Clemens, Bombadil, and Soundbite. So already not the best start to the season.
Yeah, I don't know if this has to be stressed enough, but a good start can make or break your season. I remember my first season in Division 2, I started with 2 losses, and since then I couldn't really get back in there anymore with players above me. So yeah, if you already are behind at the start, that like for players like Ollie or Clemens, that's probably just not going to help them their case. Although I do think Ollie still might be a contender for promotion, but again, with so many new players, it's hard to say. Although I do think that, yeah, Xander, in my opinion, is definitely the favorite to promote. And with such a start already, that makes it even better for him.
Yeah, Calamity, anybody you hear have a good chance at getting promoted out of this division?
Yeah, I think I mentioned my thoughts on that. We're talking about the results anyway. But yeah, it's actually the only division where we didn't have a single draw in it, which is quite interesting at least. And yeah, as you said, pretty much the plays with Reddit League experience from 6th to 10th down there at the bottom, the only exception being Xander, who's up there in second. I don't actually remember how his season necessarily went and what stopped him from getting promoted last season. It just all sort of felt like a bit of a mess in Division 5B, with favorites dropping points against people they wouldn't have really been supposed to, and at the end Laban coming out on top there just about. But yeah, I think this season for sure he should be up there again, and I think it's going to be a pretty tough fight between him and Artificial, though. It's to who gets that direct promotion spot, because if you don't finish first, it can get pretty rough to then make it through the playoff system, because that suddenly adds another 2 games to it against some players that you already know are very strong because they've also made it to second or third in the respective other division.
Very nice. Well, for their matchups coming next week, we talked about that Xander and Artificial being at the top of that table, and they will face each other in Jordan. So we could have a very decisive match right away. Vincenzo and Soundbite at the bottom of the table also facing off each other. And everybody else has a good chance to turn their weeks around if they didn't have the best start as well. MTheBassman.
Yeah, I think Xander with opponents like Oli and Artificial early on, he might be in for a very great season if he manages to pull off a result here too against Artificial. I think if I have to consider like the score Penguin put up in his native country, this might be a good chance for Oli to win and hopefully get back into promotion spots. And yeah, Soundbite versus Vincenzo, that's also going to be pretty decisive for if they're going to be relegation candidates or a bit more in mid-table, as the season is not too long with 9 games. Yeah, Bombadil Clemens is also a relegation decider. So yeah, lots to play for already in the second week.
Yeah, Clement, any matches you're looking forward to? Obviously, the American Derby promises a lot.
Yeah, that's already a very early, pretty important matchup for both of them. I think most of the matches generally are pretty much matches at eye level, where you could see results going either way for pretty much all of them. And therefore, that generally means it's a pretty important game if it's a game against someone who's similar to you in terms of skill. And I think Jordan is also probably an interesting country to have these matches in, because especially in the lower divisions, if you've got a lot of time in Jordan, the thing is, usually in some of the more rural locations, all that time rarely really helps you that much, because you if you've practiced a bit at least, then you're gonna probably know right around where you are anyway after like 2 or 3 minutes. And probably the additional time is not going to help you pinpoint because there's not going to be many reference points on highways in the middle of nowhere. But if you've got a seat that has a few more cities, then that could quite easily make a lot of difference, because I think especially Amman is not a very easy city to pinpoint. So if you can have a bit of more time, I think we could see some perfect scores in Jordan here as well. But obviously, yeah, you need a seat to lend itself to that, because if you're just on a highway on a very long straight one, then you're just going to be relying on luck, and probably not even that is going to help you to get a perfect score.
Nice. And finally, Division 5B, a couple of recognizable names in this one amongst Neusel and Danny Blondes. And we got 2 perfect games, Danny Blondes being one of them, Sheldon Wong, the other, a newcomer, just outdoing Jack, unfortunately for him, MTheBassman.
Yeah, very impressive start, of course, for Danny and Sheldon, as you mentioned. I didn't expect Jack to... I expected Jack to put up a bit more of a fight, I guess. But yeah, don't know what happened there. Otherwise, yeah, not much to say about this score, I would say. I think Neusel did pretty all right still, but had the bad luck of facing Danny. And yeah, very close game too against the 2 Frenchmen, who, I don't know, could be promotion contenders, but also just a bit tough to say in these divisions where I'm not too familiar with a lot of these players.
Yeah, Calamity. We see like one of the newcomers, Jack, has been in Formula G for a while, and we definitely thought he would do better in preseason, but he does seem to be having a little bit of trouble with Formula. He has no problem in Formula G. He's a bit of a problem in Reddit League.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that's just something he's not too well suited to. But yeah, not a great start for him either. He's got 8 more weeks to show what he can do. Danny Blonde's getting the exact start that he needed. He had a bit of a disappointing end to last season, as I already mentioned before, in that mess that was Division 5B. And he'll surely want to come back strong and secure promotion this season. It's not really getting much easier. There's definitely some strong candidates in there. Neusel, they're a bit unlucky, I guess. Just about, I think he was sixth as well with his total score, so just missing out on a bonus point there. With compared to the others in division, a pretty decent score, not the best, but 24k. Yeah, I think Paranoid Android is kind of in the same situation as Bombadil in 5A as well, where he narrowly avoided the drop last season, but low score in week ones is not a good way to make sure you don't end up in the relegation battle again.
Nice. Well, taking a look at the table, yeah, of course, our 1 week in, our top scores are the guys who've got those 25Ks, Sheldon and Danny Blondes topping the charts, but also nice wins from our no, and a newcomer, Aranjan. Two Bosnians in this division. Makes it quite interesting when you look at those flags. Yeah, some more returning veterans, though. Geoguessr, Neusel, Jack, I guess not to Reddit League, but just in general, and Paranoid Android not having the best of starts they would have wanted in this one in the basement.
Yeah, the table it could maybe change, especially in the middle a lot, because I would say that Sheldon and Danny are probably the favorites for promotion, considering that Sheldon did quite well in Map Battle League. I don't think he lost a game there even, and yeah, Danny has already been contender for promotion the last 2 seasons, so I hope this time it'll work out for him. Yeah, otherwise I don't really know enough about the other players to really judge well, but I would have expected Jack also to be up there, but with such a start, I don't know if he will have the momentum for that. Although, of course, there's still plenty of weeks left. Yeah, it's always after 1 week. There's not a lot you can say still.
A lot still possible in this one, Calamity. But yeah, are the newcomers going to give our veterans here a bit of a run for their money, or we got some pretty strong contenders from returning from last season?
Yeah, I think it's a good mix for sure. I think Neusel, he had a really bad time last season in Division 4. He only picked up 3 points over the course of the whole season. I think he might do a little bit better in Division 5, even though he lost his first game. I do think he's capable of at least finishing mid-table there. But yeah, I think like especially the lower end of the table has gotten quite a bit stronger yet again this season. And we'll definitely see some pretty good players that will be just, relegated in this season. And yeah, for promotion race, I say it every season, Geoguessr, come on. But yeah, Sheldon, Danny Blonde's definitely good candidates for that. Yeah, I don't know too much about No. He might be in for a shout as well. Narajan and Dukmir, the two Bosnians, I think they're more likely going to be looking at maybe, staying around that 7th, 8th. I wouldn't be surprised if they're right at that edge and fighting to stay up in Division 5. And yeah, Paranoid Android, I think, is going to have a rough time. Jack, I don't know, if he continues to play like this, he might be in for a rough season as well.
Very nice. Well, their matchups are pretty much top of the table versus bottom of the table here. Jack taking on Danny Blonde, Sheldon Wong taking on Parent Android. So definitely a good chance that if you didn't like how the season started, you can change your kind of trajectory, or it could even get even worse, taking on some of the better players from week 1 in here, MTheBassman.
Yeah, Jack, Danny. I mean, these could be like really decisive games for the rest of the season. If Sheldon and Danny also win this game, then they are definitely looking like promotion contender for me. However, if Jack puts up a fight this time and gets a result, it could be very important for him to get a result here. Also, Neusel Geoguessr also could be very I mean, yeah, decisive for the rest of the season. And like I said, for the other players, don't know too much about them yet. But yeah, still a lot of to play for already for these players as well.
Very nice. And before we get to our map, we do have the new competition Reddit League next. We've got 6 players in there trying to compete. They are playing on a very low time limit, so not expecting those high scores we've been seeing throughout most of the other divisions, but it will give them a good chance to practice some of these maps and put themselves to the test. Yeah, so Clement, you want to say a bit about how that competition went in week 1?
Yeah, I mentioned it before already, but it was by far the most difficult seed out of the ones we had. I think, let me just quickly look it up again. Yeah, it was basically even out of all of the other players who did play through the seed. I mean, Raidman didn't even get a perfect score. That tells you a lot. He did get like 24.9k though. Hexalt got like 22k, and then I was in third with 19.3k, and that should already tell you quite a bit about that seed. It was very rural. You had to travel a bit, really make use of like phone numbers and postcodes maybe to get a good score there. And yeah, unsurprisingly, our candidates from Reddit League next struggling a bit with that seed. Srossel getting the by far best score with 14.3k, and then we're going down below 10k. But as I said before, not expecting the highest amount of like aces or perfect games in this division, just because the low time. Mr. Blue asked me about this after, like off camera, after the preview show as well. So I thought I might as well explain it here on my decision why I went with 3 minutes as the time limit for next instead of, like, for example, 5 minutes as Division 5 has. And that was because for this one, because in the general Reddit League, in the normal divisions, 101 points is all it takes to make a difference between players. So because of that system, you don't necessarily need to always like create such a big difference between players. But because Reddit League Next just works off of total score, you want players to be separated by more points, and that only really happens when seeds are difficult, when time is short. Because if you just give everyone like 5 minutes, then they're gonna get pretty good scores, and then it's just it'll put way more of an emphasis on the difficult countries. Because if you get, like, in Poland, if it's an easy seed, if you get like 24.9 or 24.7, it doesn't matter when then next week in Jordan one gets 22k and one gets 4k. And I don't want that, because every map should at least somewhat have a similar importance, even though of course always the world maps are going to be slightly easier and therefore slightly less important in that competition with those factors. But that's the main reason why I decided to go with such a short limit, to just create bigger differences between players.
Very nice. Well, good luck to all of you in Reddit League next. Hopefully you'll be able to join Reddit League next season. And finally, we've been kind of talking about it on and off throughout the entire day. Jordan is our map. Calamity, you made this one special after you weren't really satisfied with any of the maps out there. It is a polygon map with exactly 14,391 locations. Hasn't been played too much as of when I made this image, but definitely players have already started to practice it, and the scores are going to start changing quite quickly. Yeah, I played a few practice games, so to speak, not really spending 4 or 5 minutes in a location, more like just a minute or so, trying to get a feel for the country. And it can be quite tricky, throws a little bit of a curveball sometimes at you with some of these weird signs as well. But yeah, your thoughts on Jordan, MTheBassman? We'll start with you.
Yeah, it's definitely one of the most practice heavy maps I've had in Reddit League. Like, I would like maybe compare it a bit to Kyrgyzstan in the sense of that you as you practice, you start to recognize what looks like what, including certain cities. Like, if you've already played a few practice games, you can immediately recognize Akaba from Amman, for example, just to name a very very obvious example. But yeah, you definitely need to put in a good score if no let me rephrase that. You definitely need to practice a lot if you want to get a good score, especially in the higher divisions, because half of the trick of Jordan, what I've noticed, is recognizing landscapes and not getting too turned around by some road markers, which was for me the biggest struggle. That sometimes they, like, you were in Jerash, for example, which is north of Amman, but you still had a sign that said Jerash. So I assumed I wasn't in Jerash, but I was. Those kind of stupid things that you need to keep in mind. Yeah, definitely one of the trickiest countries in this season.
Yeah, Calamity.
It's interesting. Well, first of all, the information there is slightly outdated. I don't actually know if I just made a mistake the first time I wrote the description, mentioned how many locations it was, because I feel like it was more before then. But I then made a slight change because I noticed when I started playing to get some of the competitive seeds, that Petra came up quite often. So I was like, all right, I'm remaking that polygon. I'm cutting it out of there. So that's not there anymore. And then I reevaluated and it has like 16,700 locations. So either I made a mistake the first time around, or I cut something out and we somehow ended up with more locations than before. I don't know how that would happen. So I'm tempted to say I made a mistake the first time. But by now it's been played by 201 times. And average score is 20.5k actually. So pretty easy apparently. I actually had slightly different experience than Bassman while creating seeds and while practicing a bit, where I thought that, yes, without practice, Jordan is going to be super difficult. But after like playing 2, 3, 4 times, it already started becoming much easier because it doesn't have much street view. Kind of similar, I like to compare it with North Macedonia of Season 2, I think, where there's not a lot of coverage. Basically, you've got the highways and that's it. And then you've got, of course, the cities. But in general, I feel like most of the highways, the thing is as well, highways all have pretty good signage in the sense that like every kilometer or so, you've got a little thing at the side of the street that tells you A, which road you're on, and B, usually how far away from Aqaba and Amman you are. Now then, of course, you have to sort of either get good at judging distances, or you just need to remember roughly, okay, at that sort of marker, at that kilometer marker, we're roughly about that far between each of those. But once you have that in you, I noticed it's become relatively easy to get decent scores, even without having to move around much. I do think that the landscapes aren't actually that different. You have like three different types of landscapes. You've got the relatively mountainous, it's still not that mountainous part in the far south in Aqaba. You've got the very desert-like middle of the country, although in that middle of the country, there's also like in pretty much the dead center of it, there's a very mountainous area. But it's quite clearly different from Aqaba, so you can tell that apart pretty well too. And then you've got the more green, more hilly northern area of the country. But that's pretty much it. So if you end up on one of the highways, you still kind of need like at least some sort of estimation on where along that highway you are. And that I think is mostly the difficult part about Jordan, is really getting those highway locations in the middle of nowhere correct, because you generally do not have a lot of information there. You have, as I said, mostly you do know which highway you're on, but then you've got a pretty good stretch of like maybe 50 to 100 kilometers where you could possibly be somewhere there, and there really is basically nothing in terms of reference points. Like if there's a building in like a 10-kilometer stretch of road somewhere, then you've already seen a lot. So the way I use, or I do it, is I try and find some sort of curve somewhere, and then that already narrows it down quite a bit. The more defined the curve, the better, obviously. So from then on, you can at least like narrow it down to, well, I can't tell quite exactly how the curve goes, but it's probably either this or that. And then you can try and see, okay, maybe I can find some sort of like at least small town that might not be on the map, but maybe you can at least find a few buildings. Maybe there's one little road going off somewhere that happens to be on the map. But yeah, I think that's the main challenge, because it is difficult, very difficult to pinpoint in Amman, and also can be pretty tricky. Although I agree with Baseman that you can sort of tell the cities apart relatively well, but it can be tricky in some of the more suburban areas, maybe in some of the not so central areas, to tell apart. Like cities like Attafia from Kerak, Madaba is also not too different. In Jarash, you do have a quite some sort of historical like ruins in the middle of it. So if you can just get to a place where you can see those, that tells you that. And yeah, Aqaba is completely different from the others, so that's pretty easy to tell apart. But the cities I mentioned before can be tricky, especially if you get stuck there, go in circles, and just haven't seen them too much before. I think I played. Obviously not talking about the actual seeds because I wouldn't want to spoil anything about those, but I don't think I got Madaba very often at all in my other practice that I did. So that's one that the first time I got it, I was surprised by, because it did look slightly different, but it also didn't really have a clear look about it. So yeah, in general, as a summary, not the most difficult country for me, actually, if you put in a bit of practice. Because if you don't, then you're going to be in for a rough time.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. I think it really is a practice-heavy map. I played a few. Another thing I would recommend is if there are just two very noticeable bodies of water, and maybe be able to tell which one you might be close to. If you are close to one of those, that can definitely help you out. Helping you pinpoint. Don't forget to use that as well. Well, thank you all for watching. It's been quite a long show. We appreciate you sticking around till the very end. And yeah, we wish you all the best of luck in Jordan, and we will see you next week. Take care.
Bye.
See ya.